With me now are Jason Furman, former chair of the White House Council of Economic Advisors under President Obama. He's currently a professor of economics at Harvard. And Douglas Holtz-Eakin is president of the American Action Forum, and he's a former chief economist of President Bush's Council of Economic Advisors. Gentlemen, good to see you. Jason, I tend to think that we now sort of see what the divide is in Capitol Hill right now, that you have a chunk of folks, mostly Democrats, who believe there's got to be more urgency, more money pumped in here, and we can debate how you do it. And there's a growing consensus among some Republicans on Capitol, not everybody, we know some believe there needs to be more action too, who are in a bit of a wait-and-see mode. I think I have an idea of where you are. Do you at all have any empathy towards the wait-and-see mode?
We've done quite a lot. I think that's really true. I don't think we need to layer trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions on top of this. But what we've done comes to an end on July 31st for unemployed workers. Something needs to be continued after that. And what we've done has been woefully insufficient for states and localities. They're going to start cutting their budgets, laying people off, and making our economic problems worse come the fall. That also needs to be dealt with.
Douglas Holtz-Eakin, do you concur on the issue of state and local governments? Should this be considered more of a priority than some see it?
I think it's quite clear that lots of states and localities have undertaken the burden of a public health mission. It's in the national interest for them to do that, and there's no reason why we shouldn't, as federal taxpayers, pick up that tab in whole or in part. I think the real tough issue is that the CARES Act, the previous action of Congress, gave the Treasury $500 billion, and that has essentially not been deployed by the Federal Reserve. And the potential to leverage that into another $2.5 trillion worth of help to all parts of the economy, but especially to the states and localities, which have their own dedicated facility at the Fed, which has not yet been open to be used. And if that works effectively, the bill you have to pay in other places goes down. And so it's not crazy to collect some data on that front before you go forward with the next step, regardless of the needs on the ground. That's important.
Well, let me follow up on that point with you, though, Douglas Holtz-Eakin. Even Pat Toomey, who is somebody that doesn't like to spend a lot of money, believes that Steve Mnuchin's being too conservative with control of this $500 billion you're talking about, and that he has said that Treasury might make money off of this, and there's a concern that that's why he's being so careful and he only wants to try to make investments that make money. Is that a mistake?
Yes, that is a mistake. The Congress voted and the president signed a bill that said go lose $500 billion. And when the Congressional Budget Office looked at this, it said, well, they're not going to lose any money. They're going to charge so much for the loans, they'll get the money back. And that's not the right strategy. The whole idea was to get the money out the door to broad swaths of the economy. We've asked the larger businesses to take loans, not get grants, as other places did. We are essentially asking states and localities to do that because when the revenue went away for the businesses, the sales taxes went away for the states. And so that's what this was supposed to do, and to do it quickly. And that meant taking risks that lost money. The Secretary basically said today that he's willing to take risks, but there's no evidence that the Treasury is being aggressive enough. So I think that's an unforced error by the Treasury. That's been true for a while. And hopefully today's hearing will get them to move more quickly on that front.
Jason Furman, there's also a bit of a geographic challenge I think we have for opening up the economy. The fact of the matter is many of the metro areas can't be opened up as fast as non-metro areas. And for most states, the metro areas account for 60 to 70% of the entire economic output of a state. How should that be factored into this rescue as we rescue the economy? And it, unfortunately, I think we're getting into a red-blue divide on this stuff rather than realizing the two need each other if you want this economy to recover.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what matters for the economy isn't what governors say about what's open or not open. It's what people are willing to do and feel safe doing. You could open up all the restaurants in my neighborhood tomorrow, and I wouldn't go into any of them. to sit and dine there. That's why when you look at the consumption data in Georgia and you look at the consumption data in New York State day by day, they've gone up and down in almost exactly the same manner, even though they had very different epidemics, very different policies from their governors. So if you want to have a successful reopening strategy, that has to be how you're successfully controlling the virus, controlling the spread of the virus. And absent that, whether it's face masks, testing and tracing, what have you, you're not going to get very much economic activity back.
Let me ask you this, Jason Furman, is that what you're being asked, how do you get demand back, right? This to me is the biggest unknown here is how, you can't open demand. You can open a store, but you can't open demand. How would you expedite demand? Is it all testing and tracing at this point?
Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot more economic policy can do in that regard for households. Through the end of July, there's an issue that things expire at the end of then. But right now, unemployment insurance is essentially replacing lost earnings. A family of four has gotten a check for $3,400. There are definitely people hurting in the economy. There are too many that have fallen through the cracks, certain immigrants, certain people on nutritional assistance without health care. But for the bulk of people, the issue is that they can't spend money, not that they don't have the money to spend. So I think we've done mostly the right thing on fiscal policy. We've left out some people, we've left out states and localities, but for most households, we've done the right thing. It's healthcare that we need to get right to really fix the economy from here.
One last question for you, Douglas Holtz-Eakin. I saw Cory Gardner endorse the Josh Hawley payroll, his version of how to protect a payroll, and it's slightly different than what we've seen, a progressive version of it. But there's a lot of resistance inside the Republican community to that idea, too. Do you think that's going to get more traction or not?
I don't think so. It has a real problem at this point in the nation's dealing with the pandemic fallout. We've done an extraordinary amount, as Jason has said, to support demand and to take on the need to put the economy in suspended animation through the worst of the pandemic. We're now trying to figure out step by step where we will be able to reopen. It's never been fully closed, so where can we open more, and what does it take to eliminate the fear that is at the core of stopping people from going forward to work and for business to open their shops because of liability concerns. What all that means is the economy is going to come back in some new form. It'll look different because we have a virus we have to face every day, and we have to adjust and modify to that. What the Hawley approach does is says, okay, we want to lock the economy in the way it looked in January. And that's just a bad idea. We need to allow the economy to do what it typically does, which is adjust to conditions. We've been paying people to not adjust. That was a strategy. Do nothing for 2.5 months. Now we have to give incentives to adjust to what we have, make people feel safe at work, make people feel safe in commerce, and build the economy for the remainder of 2020 and beyond.
Jason Furman and Douglas Holtz-Eakin, thank you both for sharing your expertise and your points of view with our viewers. It's nice to hear from a couple of experts rather than politicians sometimes, so thank you both.